All right. Hi there, boys and girls. We are ready to begin Advent. It's still November, but we have to get 4 Sundays in. And in December, there's only 3 Sundays before Christmas. Sometimes we get the 4th one in December as well. But this year, we're on our beginning our journey on the last day of November, November 30th. That's today. And so we're beginning Advent. In our church, we'll be decorating the Christmas tree, and we'll sing some Christmas songs as we move to it. And we've got a story that will take us through Christmas Day, and it's a story of Holland's missing Christmas. Now, this was set a long time ago. This was set back at the time of our Revolutionary War. Remember George Washington? You may have started some things about George. And at Valley Forge, where he kept his army through the one winter, and other things that happened. And the battles were against the British, the King George and his redcoats that were dressed. Now, we're not going to see any pictures of King George or the redcoats, but that was a part of our Revolutionary War times. And so this happened in those early years of the 1700s, before our revolution happened, that Holland had to give up Christmas. Now, what had happened was the Pope, that's the leader of the Roman Catholic Church, had changed the calendar. Way back before Jesus was born, there was an emperor named Julius Caesar, and he had set up a calendar, better than ones that were before him, but he'd set up a calendar. And then when Pope Gregory came along in the 1500s, he changed it to a Gregorian calendar. Well, when that change was made, they lost some days. Now, we do it this way a little differently. We have our calendar, and every year has 365 days, except every 4 years we add a day. Do you remember when we add that day on? We call it a leap year, and we add a 29th day to February. We have to do that because we'd be way off. We need that extra day to get us back closer to the sun. Now, we don't get back close completely, so we're still varying a little bit, but not enough for us to worry about. Now, maybe 1,000 years from now they can worry about it, but we don't have to worry about it at this point. But that's why we have a leap year. Every 4 years we have a February 29th. The rest of the time we just have February 28th, and we go into March and go from there. This was a year. This is a pretend story. We're going to meet Peter here. That's Peter, and this story takes place in the Netherlands, often called Holland. And you may have gotten tulips and bulbs from Holland. I remember when I was a young kid like you, I had sent away to Holland, Michigan, and I got some bulbs from there. Now, they're just like the Dutch bulbs, but I got them from Holland, Michigan. And I planted them, and we had beautiful tulips from them. That's what happens there. Now, there are some other things I want you to notice in the picture here. This is Peter, and he has a kind of a different cap. You'll see a lot of different caps on people. Now, I've got this cap. Is there something different about this cap? Yeah, you think of Santa's cap as being red, but in some countries, not in Holland, this is not the cap that Santa Claus, or St. Nicholas as they call him, wears in Holland. I'll show you in a week or so what that cap looks like. It looks very different. But in some countries, Santa has a green outfit. In the United States, he has a red outfit. And that comes in. Sometime we'll talk about how come chose red. But anyway, this happens. This is a kirk. Did you know that? We would call it a church. But we have a CH on the beginning of the word church, and we have a CH on the end of the word church, and sometimes CH sounds like a K in our language. Okay? So if I said catch, there's a CH at the end, but it can be also like catch, a K. So we have that, but that's a kirk. That's a church. This man is called a burgomeister. Now, I'm not going to tell you today what that means, but we'll get to that. A burgomeister. And he doesn't eat hamburgers, and he doesn't sell hamburgers. It sounds like that, doesn't it? It sounds like he sells or eats hamburgers, but it's not. He's a burgomeister. Okay? And you'll know more about it than you realize when I explain that to you. But we're going to be presenting 4 Sundays, and maybe a little bit longer, talking about Holland's missing Christmas. I want to introduce you to Peter today. Here's Peter. He's walking along in his town called Holland, Netherlands, or Holland. And he's going down. He's 10 years old. Any of you 10? You could identify with him. He's got strange looking pants on, doesn't he? They look like pantaloons. That's a Dutch word for pants. Pantaloons. And they're like a balloon. They puff out there like that. But that's how they keep them warm. Yeah, that would be important. He has a double-breasted shirt on, buttons down 2 sides. And he has his hat, which keeps him warm. Now, in Holland, most of the people have blonde hair. I didn't have blonde hair. Even when I had hair, it wasn't blonde. It was black. But most people have blonde hair. And you know, they have blue eyes, too. That's a tradition, or I want to say a characteristic. That's a better word. Characteristic of the Dutch people. Now, we have some people here that we call the Pennsylvania Dutch. Right? They're the Amish. And they came from the Netherlands. They're Pennsylvania Dutch. They're the Dutch that live in Pennsylvania. They oftentimes spoke German because Netherlands at times was part of a German federation and belonged. They were called the Low Countries. Now, they were called the Low Countries because they were low. You imagine that? They were below sea level. Now, when the tide is out, that is, the waters of the ocean and the sea are out, because the moon takes them out every day and back again. That was fine. But when the tides came in, it covered a lot of the ground. So they built some dams. They call them dikes. But it's the same idea. Some of them are 6 foot, 8 foot, 10 foot tall. And they would keep out the seawater so that they could have more land to grow the tulips on and other things. But they also had streams that came down through their land out to the sea. But with a 6 foot wall, you can't get that water out to the sea. So it would back up, and then they'd have flooding again. So they built canals to take the water down to the dikes. And then they had pumps. And we're going to see a picture of those pumps in just a moment to pump that water up. But Peter's walking along, clump, 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 clump. He's not wearing shoes. Do you know what he's wearing? Klompens. That's what they call them. They're wooden shoes. They take a piece of a log and they start cutting it out and they make it so that it's wooden. Now, what would be the benefit of wooden shoes? If you're walking in the rain, you're not going to hurt them because they're made out of wood. You just wipe them off and dry them off and away you go. If you're walking on cold ground, there's a distance between the bottom of the shoe and your foot, so to keep your feet above the cold ground. Yeah, klompens. And they're called klompens because they go clump, 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 clump as you're walking along. That's the way wooden shoes are going to be. And they don't mind them because that's what they're used to. Now you can see he's got some knee socks on to help keep warm. He's got a scarf on and he's going along. Now, as he's going along, there's something in the picture here. You can't hardly see it, but I'm going to turn the page and you'll see it better. Okay? Here we go. It's a strange looking house. Peter has a friend who lives in a house like this. Do you know what this house is called? It's called a windmill. Yeah. This is the part. The wind makes that go round and round. Now you may have seen pictures of windmills in our country here in the early farmers' days before electricity. They used windmills to pump the water up out of the well. And so they would have tubs for it. This is used to pump the water out of the canals into the ocean. And his friend lives in the windmill. They're kind of built round, although they can be built square. And they're there, and they run. And Peter said, I wonder what it'd be like to live in a windmill. Now, he may have also gone to visit his friend from time to time. And you go in the door, and you go upstairs, and then there's a walkway around the windmill, or at least in the front of it, to repair when you had to work on the windmill. So the windmill's there to pump the water. Doesn't have to go deep into the ground like windmills did in this country, but pumps the water up. But when we got electricity, now when I was a little boy, your age, we didn't have electricity, and we had a well outside with a hand pump. And I had to go out and crank that pump up and down with a bucket and catch the water and take it in, so that we could drink water and we could wash water and do different things. We didn't have indoor toilets either because there wasn't water for that, so we had an outhouse that we go out to. And that was a terrifying thing at nighttime in the winter. You were cold and you didn't want to go to the outhouse. But we did, and we made it. So Peter's waving to his friend up in the windmill, and I think he goes there to see him. Now, Peter goes by Hans the baker's shop. What do you suppose Hans the baker makes? You can see him there. He makes cookies. Now, some of the cookies are in the shape of round and like that, but some of them are in the shape that looks like Santa Claus. But they don't call him Santa Claus. They call him St. Nicholas. Now, if you say St. Nicholas real fast, in a hurry, he almost comes out, St. Nicholas! It sounds like Santa Claus, doesn't it? St. Nicholas! And so that's how we got to call him Santa Claus. Because the Dutch told us about him when they lived in New York. New York City. It used to be called New Amsterdam. That's another city in Holland. Yeah. So he's looking in the window and he's saying, oh, I hope. And see, here's what he's hoping for. I hope St. Nicholas brings me some cookies and puts them in my klumpens. Because that's what they do. They set the klumpens outside the house. Now they put some grass and some treats in it for St. Nicholas's horse. And then he takes that and gives them to his horse. And then, I said horse, didn't I? I didn't say reindeer. Because they see St. Nicholas coming on a big white horse with a big bag of toys and cookies and all kinds of things. Yeah, that's in Holland. Okay? So he's looking in that window and he's saying, boy, I hope he brings me some good stuff because I really like some of those cookies. And maybe we'll see them. Well, then, remember this picture on the front? This is basically the same picture. It doesn't have the color that we had before. And there's the Burgomeister, and he's got a big piece of paper. And he's reading something to the people. Some of them look shocked. You see that one there? Oh, she's shocked. Some are afraid and scared of what it means, what he's reading. And this little girl down here with her special Dutch cap, she doesn't understand what he's saying. Nothing makes sense to her. And there's just, this one's very sad. And there in the back you can see the crook again. Well, you know what this Burgermeister was saying to the people? You don't know, do you? And you won't know until next week. And I'll tell you then. Okay? All right, we're going to have a prayer. And then I'll see you next week. Okay? Father, thank you for the holiday that's coming and for all that it means for us as children and as adults. For the time that we celebrate the coming of Jesus. And we sing the songs that talk about that, like Away in the Manger in our little town of Bethlehem. So, as we get ready for Christmas and we read the story here, help us to sing our songs with extra enthusiasm and with thanksgiving for loving us as you did. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, see you next week, boys and girls.